Oh,
There we go.
sorry about that.
Can you hear us, Anthony? Can't really hear him, he's muted. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and start. Welcome everybody to tonight's City of Tumwater Planning Commission meeting for Tuesday, August 13th, 2024, 7 p.m., and our meeting is called to order. Are we still having audio issues?
No, I think we're set.
All right. Is there a way to tell?
Trying to figure out.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll go ahead and start with roll call. If we have to start over, we won't be too far along. Or are we not dialed up?
We're on a call right now. Anthony, can you hear us?
Yeah.
Wait for a moment.
Since we're connected, phone call, I would,
I could try dialing on my number and see if,
Okay, sure.
We're
Good idea.
connected here, so.
so if I dial the dial-in information without,
There we go.
okay.
Anthony, can you hear us now? We can see
Yep,
you.
it's good now.
Alrighty.
Oh, phew, okay.
Perfect.
Not only are we called to order, we're actually audible. That's good.
Order, yeah.
I'll go ahead and do roll call. Commissioner Edwards is excused. Commissioner Kirkpatrick,
Here.
Commissioner Staff,
here,
Vice Chair Tobias,
here.
Commissioner Varela,
Here,
and me, Commissioner Robbins. Thanks, everybody. Let's see, are there any changes to our agenda tonight? Anybody? Okay. How about commissioners' reports? It's been a month since we last met, so.
We can reintroduce ourselves.
I know, practically. Anybody got, news you want to share, things going on?
Brewfest this weekend. I'm volunteering all day, so I'll be there from 11 to 8. Long day.
Mayor said she'll be there a little late. She has another event earlier in the afternoon, so.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, I'll just mention Commissioner's report. Brad and I and the mayor had a chance to meet with some candidates to fill some of the vacancies on the commission. And things are looking good. We have a couple more interviews, and I think we'll have a full complement. Did the mayor say by our October meeting?
Yes,
It's going to take a little while for the procedures and going to council and all that kind of stuff, but we should be up to full strength, October or so. I'm looking forward to meeting some new folks. All right. Brad, how about manager's report?
following up on planning commissioners, I think, if I remember correctly, the mayor said we will have one of the people that we interviewed, they're in the final details, bringing them on board. And that two of the candidates for other commissions actually accepted coming onto the planning commission. We'll be meeting them in person on Friday. So I don't know anything about them, the names that I got today. So, but it sounds like everybody will be appointed and in shape in time for probably the second meeting in September is what I'm hoping.
Oh, okay, that early, great.
Yep.
Great. If things work out.
The other thing I'd like to bring up is, it's been a couple of years, but I'd like to see about setting up some times to talk to you individually, to see how everything is going, especially since we're in the middle of paper season for the next year and a half with the comp plan update. I think it's probably a good idea to check in. So starting September, October, I'll reach out and see what times you have available, meet in person, anywhere you'd like. Preference.
That would be with both Brad and me. I hope, meet individually with folks, how things are going. It was a lot of fun last time. All right, anything else, Brad?
Open house tomorrow.
Oh, yes, thank you. The Climate Element Open House is tomorrow. Information is online on the comp plan update. webpage. There's an online component that will also be starting, similar story map to what was done for the housing element. They've also done a very extensive story map for the PNML, and I encourage you, if you're not able to attend in person, to check out the online version, which will be on probably through the end of September. So,
Cool, good. Thanks for that reminder.
That's
Got a flyer.
Osha's, is it Osha's
Yep.
Community,
yeah.
yeah, Community Center?
7.
If you want food, it's catered, so come a little early.
Lead with that.
I know they
Yeah, I
did.
should have led with, yes, it is catered by, sounds like we're gonna have hopefully more than 30 people there, who attendees have confirmed they'll be there.
That's cool. Very cool. All right, do we have anybody online from the public, Brad?
We have one person, Warren Hendrickson from the Port of Olympia.
Oh, okay, great. Mr. Hendrickson, if you, I think I'm saying your name right, I can't quite see it up there, but, if you would like to address the Planning Commission, for a few moments on, either topics coming up today or anything in general, please do that now. If you would introduce yourself and your affiliation, that'd be great. Or if you're representing yourself as a resident of Tumwater.
Second later.
Something went awry.
Control, oh.
Yeah, we'll just leave him. We'll leave him. He's fine.
See, I remember. Last time I did that.
Let's see.
Well, we're having,
Change
if
roles
you,
with Cindy.
if you'll be patient with us, back in a, perhaps, what we can do is in between 7 and 8, we'll check back in. So, in case you want to, address the planning commission, otherwise we're not quite, something's not quite working technically. All right, hopefully that works for everybody. Brad, would you like to start in on our 7th order of business, the 2025 Comprehensive Plan periodic update and our document format?
Yeah, so, let me, Anthony, can you see that?
Yep, looks good.
Thank you. So tonight I wanted to share the direction we're moving in terms of the document format. As we've been discussing, we're going to revamp the whole comprehensive plan, with the exception of the parks element. We are still waiting for a person to come on board to help us with the economic development side, so we're kind of in a waiting mode for that. But everything else will be formatted along these lines in similar ways. We've decided that we're going to have one single document sort of act as the introduction, as well as the overall goals for the element, for the entire plan, because we've been, running through our, list of, we've got these overarching themes that just go through everything, and we just put them in one place and deal with it that way. So this is just to give you an idea of sort of the format. So on top would be that plan introduction section. Related to that would be a user guide, which would be for the community at large. What is the comprehensive plan? What do you actually do with it? Why is it important? All those kinds of things. And then a second one, which is impossible to read, which is the Golden Policy Guide, which is intended to take all the goals and policies from all the various elements and put them in one place, so the council can pull that down, or you can pull it down and say, here's all the implementation actions, here's everything else, and hopefully I keep saying it's going to be a shorter document, but the thing just keeps getting bigger. But it's going to be a document, so that will be helpful. And then each of the individual elements and plans that are part of it, land use, climate, capital facilities plan, and so forth, will each have their own section. Things like land use, climate, and so forth will have a goals and policies implementation chapter, and then there will be a separate technical guide. And I can show you some examples of what we're looking at doing for that kind of stuff. Very quickly, let me share this one. This document that I'm going to share is the overarching document. This is the plan introduction. If anybody comes up with a snazzier title than that, because I've just hit a wall. I can't help.
That sounds wonderful, if it actually tells you what it is.
There it is.
Introduction
Yeah,
to
but
the
it, you
plan.
know, it just doesn't spark.
Say your introduction to the comprehensive plan. Make it like,
Oh, can I do cursive type for your,
they don't teach it in school anymore, I don't know.
keep me away from this for a while.
I would say start here.
Introduction, long, title. This, foundation of the plan, this is where we sort of get into all the overall vision, the overall mission, and this is taken from, the city's documents, as well as the, what the council has identified as their strategic priorities as part of the document. Now, one issue to be aware of is that they update their strategic priorities almost every year. So it will change over time. I'm not sure how to necessarily handle that as part of the comp plan. We'll have discussions about that. So these are strategic plan goals. They're just the high level goals. We have all the growth management goals listed. The countywide planning policies are identified and are going to be a separate appendix. To let you know, there is the Urban Growth Area Subcommittee, which is made up of electeds and others under the TRPC, Thurston Regional Planning Council, is looking at amending a very narrow band of the countywide planning policies. Typically, before we do any update, we update the countywide planning policies, which are the policies that basically tell us how we're all supposed to work together. It sets out things like how do you handle an annexation, how do you expand an urban growth boundary, how do you make sure that if you do something in your jurisdiction, somebody else knows about it. Those haven't been updated since 2015, and there wasn't an appetite to update them like now because everybody's in the middle of doing everything else. So we do have one policy that we're going to try to add regarding tribal communication, which is a result of the state legislation expanding requirements for bringing tribes into the comprehensive plan process, how we do that, and so forth. There are some other amendments that have been proposed. The general tenor of the planning directors across the county is we're not really wanting to open up anything else because it will take time. Because these are more meaty issues than some simple changes. But those things will be reflected, and part of the comprehensive plan is a separate appendix as part of this. We'll also make reference throughout the document, each of the elements, to the appropriate countywide planning policy, appropriate GMA goal, and so forth. We also have a section about the ongoing plan, I can't even read my own writing, review program, which is, number one, the state law is requirements actually for the housing element, especially that after 5 years, we have to take another look and say, is it working or not? And make amendments as needed to do that. But in our mind also, it's a good idea to set out a schedule for making sure that we double check if we're not doing so on the annual amendment cycle, that everything is working. We also discuss the general amendment process as well as the update process, some language dealing with public participation. Some of this language has been updated. Some of this is from the current documents, the 2016 version. So we have bring things up to speed, but I wanted to show you how things sort of fell out in this. And then we have implementation coordination, basically how we're gonna handle working with the other jurisdictions and the tribes, and then, of course, across the departments to get things done. The next section deals with the overall plan goals. And this is where this is the work, I think we're in progress, but it's definitely the new stuff. And what we wanted to do was start to identify those things that, as I mentioned, are hold true across all of the elements. The first has to do with engagement, the goal of engaging the community across, you know, anytime we do anything with the plan, you know, community has to be involved in the process. The intent really is also to develop policies and, more importantly, implementation actions as needed to support these goals. So for the time being, these are just goals, but we've got more work that we'll be doing as part of this process. We have a coordination goal. We've added a community vibrancy goal, which I kind of like, which I think we could talk about at another time. But basically, you know, the comprehensive plan is the map for the city's investments. Where development goes, how do we support that, how we do economic development, all those kinds of things, where we spend our money in the capital facilities. You know, we're trying to make it a better place. And community vibrancy is trying to capture the larger, what makes Tumwater special versus just, yeah, we're gonna do this because we have to, kind of thing. Equity, climate resilience, fiscal stewardship, and environmental are sort of round out the goals, general goals that we're proposing. And then just to give you an idea of how the overall goals, policies, and implementations would kind of all drop in. What you see here is the first goal with a policy, proposed policy, and that's the blue line here, and the one underneath is an implementation action. Under both the policies and implementation action, we're going to be identifying leads as specific as possible, the department or, you know, this position or whatever that will be, you know, is the person responsible or people responsible for doing the work. A general idea of the period. So there are going to be things that are ongoing for like monitoring progress in the comprehensive plan or involving the public in the update process. Those are ongoing tasks. And then we have a space here for notes and stuff as we, if we want to draw additional attention to talk about, you know, here are some of the other things to consider as we're talking about the implementation action. So each of the goals will have a similar format. Breaking first the goal, a little bit of explanatory text about why that's important, and then the policies and the goals. Debating about where to put the how to use the comp plan thing, whether that should just go entirely into the user guide or what. I haven't quite figured that out, so this is a placeholder until we figure that out. And the last one is really sort of walking through each of the elements. And it's a 2-page introduction to what the element is, why it's important, and how it relates to everything else. All of the text in here is from the 2016 user guide, but the intent is to, you know, try to capture similar things in the reflecting the updated plan. So in this case, we'd be talking about population, why the, you know, for the land use side, why we're accommodating, why we're doing this in the first place, because we expect, you know, these number of people coming in. Capital facilities plan, we're talking about how typically, you know, how much money we are spending right now across general government and utilities and so forth, to give people an idea of the magnitude of the expenditures on the city side, and then, and so forth. So all of those things are in that introductory chapter to start. Any questions or about the first couple things I've talked about?
Will there be internal links in the digital version of this? So
Thank you for bringing that
if
up.
you look at the goal up front, it can actually take you to where that is.
Yeah, so there'll be two things that we're considering. Number one, this is going to be a primarily online document. How that actually, whatever format that is going to be online, and whether it's a simple PDF or something more elaborate, if we can figure that out. But what we want to use is hyperlinks within the document to take you to the supporting documents and everything else. We also want to use hyperlinks for definitions. So when we use something like Growth Management Act, it goes through an explanation of what that actually is, or the glossary or something. So you know, it's easy for someone to navigate and understand terms as we're using them. So yes, that will be part of the final document. And as we're doing that, and as we're getting the online things ready, we'll start to introduce that. And I think we started to do that in some of the elements. We got a ways to go on that, but I think it's not as hard as I feared. And if we keep it simple, meaning that we don't change any of the document locations and everything else, we worry less about broken links over time and that kind of stuff. So what we may end up with is a single file that we just keep updated over time where everything goes to. So I think
Commissioner Barilla?
Just a quick question. For this type of document, is there an accessibility review on it? So color coding, text to speech and things like that? For those who may need help?
we'll need to do all that. So
Okay.
that brings up another point. As we have a new communications manager on board and a couple of people who are assisting him. We haven't had the opportunity yet to sit down with them and talk about the accessibility issues. It's a larger picture for us because, you know, obviously everything that goes into our packets to begin with needs to be accessible and so forth. So, and whatever final result of the comp plan obviously needs to be in a fully accessible document. So we're going to have conversations about what we need to do to make sure that happens as part of that process. And how, like for pictures and so forth, we do the explanations and for the tables and everything else. So we haven't figured that out yet completely, but the discussion we need to have.
I wanted to make a suggestion that, and I'm not saying necessarily how to do it, but since it's kind of a living document, you know, it's been alive for whatever now, 30-something years, you know, and will continue into the future. I'm hoping that we can see, perhaps in the notes section under each element or goal, things that are new or different from the last time that, you know, maybe not, you know, we moved a comma or something, but, you know, the big things that are new or different, changes like that, and especially maybe progress, on,
Okay.
or,
I apologize. Could you repeat that last part? I did.
some sort of way to note new or changed, things that will come into the new comp plan, from, the past, the current one. And any progress on items, if that's relevant. Maybe it would fit in a column as text. Maybe there's a way to sidebar stuff. Maybe there are graphics that help illustrate something, whatever is the relevant thing. But, you know, so it stands out that, that it's a living document, that, you know, the city is actively trying to make this place better, and here's how, and, you know, all that kind of stuff, so.
I think we will do something like that. I think one thing, and this is after my reading through most of the 16 plan, I don't necessarily think we're going to be keeping a lot of it.
Yeah.
We're going to be we're going to consider this new start.
Pretty comprehensively new, but,
Yeah,
so, the
because-
things that people would expect if they were familiar at all with the last one. Yeah. Go ahead.
What I imagine when you're providing your comment is kind of like what we did with the hazard mitigation plan, where we put new, modified, existing, and then also there's like a status
Yeah.
table, which was kind of similar to what Brad had.
Yeah.
So it would be like ongoing, completed, kind of like, that was a requirement for the hazard mitigation plan, was to kind of start monitoring and tracking our progress
Yeah.
on our goals and like initiatives.
Yeah.
So kind of incorporating the table we have here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I think, you know, maybe there's a variety of things like that that are, you know, more that kind of progress and status and that kind of thing. And then there's also kind of relates to a secondary question of mine, which is, you know, who do we think the primary users are, and what would they want to see pulled out.
Yeah, that's a difficult one, because then, I mean, it's somewhat easy to say, yes, you, as the planning commission, the city council,
Yeah,
city staff, and then you start to think about, well, the community.
yeah.
What part of the community, what lens are they looking at through? What will be important to them? One other thing that I'm just thinking out loud is when we did the housing action plan, in the appendices and sort of the supporting documents, we kept a list of the things that we looked at but didn't bring in. And that could be a resource potentially for policies or other things that we explored, and we could talk about that so people have an understanding of here's everything that was looked at, and here's why this particular one we didn't bring that in because we either A, felt it was dealt with elsewhere or something else. So we may think about, you know, how we can possibly use things like that as
Yeah.
well.
Something to think about. Okay. Any other remarks at this point?
One of the things for the definitions, maybe a hover over definition, so it doesn't remove you from where you're at in the document.
Yeah.
Just an easy way.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that, and I was also thinking about how,
Well, exactly.
if I can do it in 2 lines, yes. If I have to do this, no.
Yep.
That was when I was sort of playing around with that. I was trying
Cool. Commissioner Tobias.
I would advise, though, keeping in mind, if you're doing links within a document, if it links to things outside of the document, make sure that it doesn't go to a dead link. Nothing worse than, you know, reading a document from like 5 years ago and like, oh, hey, I'll check the source on that. Nope, file not found.
No, and that's what we have, and I'm giving away trade secrets, but we have a shared drive called our G Drive. And in other places, I've used that as sort of the resource for all of our website information. Because I like to add things to that first before I add it to the website, so I always keep track of the versions. But I think that would be our way to sort of control that, and limit the number of outside links. So anything that we link to would be documents we have. So we don't like send them to the Commerce website that changes next year.
Mm.
And I want to say there's a link checker tool that like will run for all your hyperlinks to ensure.
They're live.
And if you run into a dead hyperlink, then it will flag it.
Part of me is excited, yes, we do all this stuff and link to everything, and the other part is there's frustration in 5 years, because nobody can actually access what we had. So I have to figure out another way to do that.
Well, it's really the same thing in the hard copy. You pick up an element of the plan. It only says what is in it. It doesn't tell you that there may have been 3 revisions made
Right,
since that document
right.
printed. So going electronic isn't going to save you from that.
Well, actually, the current 2016 document does list out all the amendments, and the header. So like the land use element, if the header is about this big, normal, about that big, because we reference the ordinance and each of the revisions. What we don't do is point to this section change in this particular way. You have to go through everything else to find it. So I haven't figured out a better way to do it.
We're ready to roll.
Okay. Let me just see, there was one other document I might want to show, 2 other things. This is from our utilities element, the draft so far. And the first document I'll share, we've talked a little bit about already because of the larger goals, policy, and implementation, but this is the example currently using the language and everything that we've sort of worked on so far. Similar kind of format as we talked about before. Introduction, what the element does, how to read the element, sort of a quick, what you're looking at kind of thing. The relevant goals from the GMA, relevant goals from the countywide planning policies, a summary of the elements' overarching goals. Remember, this is just the element, not the overall plan. And then this is where we get into the detail, with the goal here. This red text will be turned into a little explaining what the purpose of the goal is, what the intent of the goal is, and why it's there. And then individual policies are bolded. Individual action items are in italics. And same kind of format as we identified before, who the leads would be. In this case, it's the Community Development Department and Transportation Engineering. There'll be, at the beginning of the document, there's going to be a glossary explaining terms. We're going to minimize acronyms as much as possible, but we'll have that up front. So this is how this would look for the goals and policies document. Now, for the second part, and I apologize, Anthony, this is probably the most exciting thing you'll be seeing from us the whole evening, so.
The whole evening has been electric so far.
Okay, good. That's why we're closing with Erica, because we're going a high. This is the technical element of the utility. So this is where you'd find all the information about, all the background information on the private utilities. Again, a background of why this is being required, a little background on, this is, all this text is from 2016, but this is, a background on the regulations and why we're doing this. And we'll talk about the franchise agreements we have with PSE and Comcast and others. And then we go into detail about what we know about their services and how development and redevelopment will affect the need for their services. Also in this element, we're going to be talking a little bit about change over time. This is especially due to changes with PSE on climate-related things, changing sources of power and that kind of thing. So again, all the technical information, all the background information will go into this particular kind of document. Any questions about this stuff?
I kind of imagine the technical side might be especially useful to the developer, builder community. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Is that fair?
Potentially, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, what I think, things like the land use element, technical information, I think will be very important. One of the things that, when we do development permit review, and this is under state law, there are two elements to that. There's obviously how well whatever the proposed development meets the current development code, and that's everything within the Tumwater Municipal Code, as well as the development guide, which is the details of construction, how big the sidewalk should be in these locations, all those kinds of things, and the citywide design guidelines, et cetera. There's also a requirement of projects to meet the intent of the comprehensive plan. And that's really kind of, the technical guide is used also really to sort of justify, when we say we would like a park here, we've already demonstrated in the comprehensive plan a park is needed here because population, this, and this. We've also used this, especially when dealing with neighborhoods, specific development in specific neighborhoods, like character that's been identified in the town center, for example, is in the land use element under town center, which provides which in my mind probably should have been a separate sub-area plan, but is actually its own set of things within the plan that almost add on to additional policies and so forth to be considered when you're looking at development in these areas. So it serves a dual role. I mean, it's number one, to ensure that as development occurs, that there's sufficient infrastructure in place to serve it, but it's also the justification used in some cases for development permit review to say, yes, you're doing this, have this impact, and this is something identified in the comprehensive plan to do.
I have a question around that permit review. Is there a way with all of these different pieces to streamline it even more, or is there be work done around that to kind of trying to streamline these permitting plans and I know it's,
Why'd you ask that question?
I know.
Because the answer is yes.
Wonderful.
In fact, we're working on it this week.
Great.
One of the things the state legislature passed in the past couple of years was a permit reform, Bill 5290, that we have to look at our whole permitting process and the timings of how things happen and so forth, and adjust our code to make sure that they fit the new timelines. We have a lot of work to do, meaning Erica, she doesn't know it yet, to develop an ordinance by the end of the month, because we have a deadline of getting all this approved by January 1. So that means Planning Commission, you'll be seeing this at the end of September. But really, the intent is to look at our whole permitting process, make sure, number one, it works internally. Right now, I'm trying to map out how I think it works based on how the code is written. And it's not entirely clear to me how it works, and that worries me. So number one, fix it so it works as it should internally, but also make sure it's clearer to people coming in wanting to get a permit, whether it's a re-roof all the way up to, a giant warehouse. So, yes.
Thank you.
We're going to be working on that.
Exciting.
Whether it's going to be a simple, easy process, I can't tell you. All I know is it's going to be a process.
Good job, Erica. Gold star already.
Okay.
Well, thank you. That's very exciting.
Yeah. Ask me at the end of the month.
We'll see if you're still excited.
If there are no other questions on the phone.
Are we done with this one then? Okay. I'm sure you'll take other thoughts as we move along, but we'll be seeing this in this one again. Not so much the formatting necessarily, unless something else.
You'll be starting in October, you'll start to see the individual elements come
Yeah,
forward.
okay.
The conservation element will be the first you'll see, both updated, goals and policies and the technical information. Lands for public purposes will follow that shortly thereafter. So you'll see how it all actually works.
That'll be good. It's there's a lot here, and I'd say the structures looks pretty good. I realize, it's difficult to organize in some rational way all these 14 or whatever it is elements and the things we want to try to bring across about them. So yeah, it's a big lift. Thank you. All right, well, why don't we see if Mr. Hendrickson is still there? And before we go on, Mr. Hendrickson, sorry, we had a little trouble earlier, but if you'd like to address the Planning Commission now, the floor is yours for a couple of minutes.
He dropped off.
Oh.
This time without me.
No, he's
touching
still a
it.
panelist. He's a panelist,
Okay.
yeah.
All right,
Oh,
sorry.
okay.
So he could,
There you go.
I
There you
think
go.
this may work. Can you hear me now?
All right, there you go. Yeah.
That's excellent.
Please
I
go
had to
ahead.
change computers. For some reason, I was muted and I was unable to unmute the previous computer. So I switched gears. So good evening, Brad and commissioners. It's a pleasure to address you. Thank you for a few moments of your time this evening. The reason my position is I am the Director of Operations for the Port of Olympia. I was formerly the airport senior manager, and the port, of course, is a very proud landowner within the city of Tumwater, adjacent to the regional airport. The reason why I wanted to address you tonight with regard to the comprehensive plan was within the land use elements. I would request that we consider adding a goal with regard to the airport properties as a public facility. And specifically, I would consider the experience of Snohomish County when they went through a similar comprehensive plan update under the Growth Management Act. And they included a separate section within their land use capabilities of all the 6 public use airports that lie within Snohomish County. Of course, we are the only public use airport with paved runways at Olympia Regional. And the point would be, in particular, to address compatible land use requirements that ultimately would find their way into the Tumwater City Municipal Code. as well as also updating the airport overlay. The airport overlay currently in use by the municipal code is from 2004. It was updated by WSDOT Aviation in 2011 and includes an additional zone. And the point of this would be to create compatible use guidelines and also the consideration of an navigation easement to advise residential properties within close proximity to the airport of the fact that there is a public use airport in their close proximity. It's a great way to notify future landowners and residents of their location with respect to the airport, and also is very helpful to the airport in terms of its community outreach and dealing with noise complaints and issues that might be affected by the operation of aviation division. So I offer that for your consideration. Greatly appreciated. Brad and I work together very closely on a number of different issues, but I did want to address the commission tonight, and thank you very much.
Great. I appreciate your taking the time to be here and your patience in finding a way to get through to us. So it sounds like a good suggestion to me in some way. I guess I'll ask Brad a question. It seems like this is a good dovetail with things that go on in the transportation element too. Is that right?
So currently, we have a specific goal and policies dealing with the airport and the land use element as a land use, and the impacts related to land use are dealt with as part of that. I apologize, I don't recall if we have anything more than mentioning the airport as a transportation thing. Because it's not a city facility, it's a coordinated facility. Port of Olympia, we approved permits for them building out there, but overall the master planning and what happens on the airport and the operations are all Port of Olympia. So that's a question for me to answer it on how we handle that as part of the transportation.
As long as it shows up in some good way, and I do like the notion of, you know, keeping the landowners informed, because I'm actually on the flight path myself, and it's good to remind people that you're gonna have planes and helicopters. It's noisy. Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you again for taking the time to be here tonight, Mr. Hendrickson. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Let's move on then to item number 8, our 2025 comprehensive plan periodic update on the housing element. That Erica?
Erica, after she helps me
Right.
vote Mr. Hendrickson.
Yeah.
Drop him off, but
Yeah, okay, there we go. All right, I know you guys are all excited to go over these tables. So far, we have talked about the conservation element, and then we also went over the land use element. Before we start going over the table, I didn't do a presentation because we have this nice document here. I did want to go over some key terms and some items for the housing element update. When going through this, it's important to know what some of these words mean. We got comments from staff, like, is there going to be definitions provided? So yeah, let's just dive into it. First off, we're going to go over displacement. Displacement is the process by which a household is forced to move from its community because of conditions beyond their control. There's 3 types. There's physical displacement, which means they are forced to move for reasons such as eviction, foreclosure, natural disasters, or deterioration in the housing quality. There's economic displacement, that households are compelled to move by rising rents or costs of home ownership, such as property taxes. And then there's cultural displacement. Residents are compelled to move because the people and institutions that make up their community have left the area. Then we also have racially disparate impacts. That's when policies, practices, rules, or other systems result in a disproportionate impact on one or more racial groups. The current version had 13 goals. This version now has 5. What we did is we took our housing action plan, which informs the comprehensive plan, and we took goals from the housing action plan. So there's going to be 5 goals. but a lot more policies and actions. So we reduced the number of goals, but we increased our policies and actions. Part of the update was to, in addition to all of the legislature, the Growth Management Act, our countywide policies, and the Commerce guidance and checklist, we needed to strengthen our policies, and that's through active statements of impact. So increasing our policy strength. So that's what we really wanted to do, is make sure we had actions for our policies. That way we could document progress, and it actually shows intent. Let's see. Part of the update, we also part of the review and update procedure was to identify barriers and limitations on housing production, identify policies and regulations that contribute to racially disparate impacts, displacement, and exclusion in housing, document programs and actions needed to achieve housing availability, and develop goals, policies, and objectives and mandatory provisions for housing, and identify and implement policies and regulations to address and begin to undo racially disparate impacts, displacement, and exclusion in housing. Furthermore, legislation in 2021 through House Bill 1181, we needed to incorporate consideration for environmental justice, and environmental justice is the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people regardless of race, color, national origin, or income with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, rules, and policies, or all laws, rules, and policies with environmental impacts by vulnerable populations and overburdened communities. So a lot of that community engagement, making sure we're reaching out to all people regardless of race, color, national origin, or income. So with that, goal number 1 on our table was to increase the supply and variety of housing for every income and age group. This is a new goal, and based in the staff notes, you'll see it was based in part on our Housing Action Plan Strategy 1. And then also we condensed the previous version, the 2016 Housing Element Goals 4, 5, 7, 9, and 10. And then we have the current goal and policy on the far right column there. So incorporating a lot of the old goals and also incorporating the Housing Action Plan, we created this goal 1 as a broader term.
Also, very quickly, I want to point out that this is our first draft of these, and it's, as I note on the top, it's a very rough draft.
Yeah.
We wanted to get something before you because this is obviously a topic we're going to be spending a lot of time with. We've gotten some stuff, comments back, but we haven't gotten them from everybody yet. So again, what you're looking at, especially if you see language like, ooh, that doesn't sound very 24, it sounds like 2016, that's the reason. We haven't scrubbed everything completely yet, or things aren't meshing as well as we might like to yet, but this is sort of the general roadmap.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as Brad was saying, it was a rough draft because we still, again, there's so much guidance legislature that was passed. I know we've been talking about middle housing, just so much to consider. So if there's anything in here, I've even noticed where we kind of use the same verbiage, or maybe some goals and policies are a little redundant. Feel free to leave comments. I'm going through now all the guidance books from Commerce. This is just our first go using the state checklist, essentially. Goal 2.
Gotta say, I like how crisp that one is.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of other stuff to it, but that one is very crisp.
Boy, I guess goal 2 doesn't start until page 10.
Yeah.
Sorry, if we're going on to, I have a question on specifically H 1.1.1, like right near the beginning,
Yeah.
page 2.
Mhm.
Establish city programs to offset the displacement of existing housing and community members by new housing development.
Mhm.
How would new housing development displace existing households?
Yeah, that's a great question. So out of the three displacements, new housing can drive up property taxes. There's the requirement to convert to city services, utilities, and stuff like that. So that could impact the existing housing around it, therefore, making a cost burden to the existing residents, increased property taxes. So that's just like an example.
Housing could also be redevelopment,
Mhm.
replacement of single-family housing by multiple-family housing.
Or older housing stock of a lower density replaced by a new.
That's probably the most
Yeah.
direct, impact.
Like if somebody has a house that's on a couple acres and, a company moves in and says, hey, we want to turn this into an apartment complex.
Exactly.
That would,
Yeah.
okay.
Or someone's renting a house and then the owner sells it, and then a big developer comes in and redevelops the property.
Gotcha. I didn't take renters into account. I really should have there.
For example, the house I live in now was on a piece of property that a friend of mine, used as their band practice, place. And low-income housing, very affordable. So that kind of thing is also, I mean, it could be everything from very explicit changing of the neighborhood by, things, but also even on that level.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so when we're looking at goal 1, increase the supply and variety of housing for every income and age group, it is a broad term, so this is going to have a lot of policies and a lot of action items, which is why we don't get to goal 2 until page 10. If there's any goals or policies that might fit, any policies or action items that might fit better into another goal, that's also something we can consider, and that I've been reviewing myself.
I like the innovative plans, H1.4, innovative plans and kind of creative outcomes, because one thing I do, either developers or real estate people that are looking to do an investment is there's not enough innovative work in the housing market, or it's not accessible or simple enough, or the permitting process takes so long that it's disadvantageous to do a development. That's why I brought up the piece. So I think some of this language is quite nice.
Yeah.
Very has to.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Commissioner Kirkpatrick.
The words encourage versus require. I guess encourage is okay since we use it. But I see require in quite a few locations where I'm not sure that the city's in a position to require it. So you might just take a look at where you're saying require and ask yourself what process the city would go through to actually require something, or if we really want to require it.
There's some pretty forward-thinking, innovative, goals that I put in there, based on feedback from other staff members. But yeah, that's definitely something we need to do, is actually look at the language. So thank you.
You'll notice a lot of the things that we have done, that deal with disadvantaged communities or, on the lower incomes, group spectrum, where it's much more aggressive than what we've used before in terms of policies and suggestions for incorporating appropriate housing. I think I agree with you, and that we need to take a look at where we say require, but I think we're gonna be seeing a lot more of the strongly encourage, not something more than just encourage or, that kind of thing for some of these things. It's gonna be a lot more robust.
Requiring's gonna require an ordinance.
Yes.
More important than an ordinance, it's gonna require the city to have a system to enforce things, which they don't do now.
Well, and that brings up, I think, the larger thing that we're dealing with right now is, we're almost done with the land capacity analysis from, TRPC, and we're hopefully by the end of this month, we'll have a final draft. and we're gonna be using that to inform what we're doing for the housing element. One big thing that's part of that that I don't see changing, is that we're gonna be accepting even more housing units than we currently have said that we're gonna do. The 6,676 is probably gonna be 7,200 plus. And probably more of those are gonna be under 80%. And to achieve that, and I don't buy Commerce's argument that it can only be through new housing, that has to be built, purpose-built for under 80%, because I can't imagine the market ever doing that without lots and lots of incentives. We're gonna have to come up with some robust and language for implementation about how we get to that goal. Because a good portion of our new housing stock is going to be in that under 80%, whether that's converted units from whatever. However we get there, we have to figure out a much more aggressive path than we've done in the past. So we'll have more discussions about that, I think.
We talk a moment about 1.3 on page 5 of your packet. To me, these are really important because they start to get at this interwoven nature of all the different elements and goals and so on, in order to have kind of community and place that we desire to foster and create. And so I'm wondering if you could say a little bit about, you know, the placemaking opportunities, the kind of the livability aspects, you know, where are these kinds of opportunities where we would want to direct that kind of development in the city, and you know how, and then you know, I guess I would really push it to I don't know. This is one that I would really want to work on the require almost, if we could get there.
Yeah.
In order to knit those pieces together, like in H1-3.1, where you're knitting these elements together, but you're creating this livable community where people can live, and if they have a job or want a job, they can get a job. If they're retired or don't want a job, they're do whatever their opportunity is, or go to school, or they can get to medical care or food or the post office or what have you, you know, without having to climb in a car, you know.
Yeah. So
all that.
When we talk about the urban, and the language of urban corridors is from the 2016 plan, and I think and go to the urban centers. And because for us, it's the Brewery District, it's the Capitol Corridor, Boulevard Corridor, it's the town center, and it's the Little Rock area. Those are really kind of the concentrations of urban center that we're focusing, you know, higher densities in. I think, and we have some work ahead of us on the land use side to figure out where else those could be. We have very small neighborhood centers identified in the plan, which are probably too small to really develop, but there are other ways to get at that. So we're going to have a bit of work on our hands to sort of flesh that out even more.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of good concepts. We just have to figure out how they're actually going to look on the ground and where.
So urban centers sort of equates to placemaking opportunities? Okay.
So we start with the 4 that we know.
Uh-huh.
I think we're going to be expanding on those and look for what else does placemaking look like elsewhere. Maybe not to that level of density, but we're going to be probably making some transitions from what we have now.
Yeah, I hope we can be open to what I'll call kind of an organic, you know, when a neighborhood or a whatever kind of is doing that already kind of on their own and can be encouraged somehow.
Yeah, I do want to point out the action item below it is kind of like more of the detail of how we get to 1.3. So we have to incorporate other elements as well as maybe I could add something as like identified on our zoning maps, our land use map, to further direct them to specific areas. If that's what we need, is more specific areas, or at least identify where they can find those areas.
Yeah.
within this, so,
Where, and also the encouragement of, the city doesn't necessarily know where they all are. And there may be smaller opportunities, there may be opportunities that are smaller than those big, the brewery district or that kind of thing. Commissioner
Yeah.
staff?
yeah.
That's exactly what I was going to bring up is when it comes to mind, do we have it laid out somewhere? Here are the different centers that we like. We talked a few months ago about the naming conventions of different areas and kind of getting away from that, but these are centers, I think, are critical. And then also calling out what sort of resources each one of those centers have. So if I'm wanting to move to Tumwater and I go look at this map and say, oh, there's 4 different types of centers, and here's this medical complex with this one, but this one might not have anything quite yet, and this also is grocery perfect. I want to start looking at opportunities to move there. And if that's actually spelled out very well.
Mm-hmm.
I think also that there was some language that we've looked at from the existing plan that I think we could probably rework a little bit more, and bring into this when we're talking about things like 20-minute neighborhoods and things like that, to sort of get a little bit more at the types of things we're looking at. When we say urban center, this is what we mean.
Yeah.
Within 20-minute walk of
Right.
these kinds of things, and then that kind of thing. So I think we could spell that out a little bit more in this section as well.
Maybe not in the actual goals and policies, but in like the section above or the user technical guide.
Or, actually, this might be a good spot for the notes.
Okay.
Just say,
Yeah.
this is, a little more background.
This might also be an area where, let's say the city has some, its own property, rights of way or other city property that could, say, support a festival or a pop-up market or a whatever kind of a thing, that, could help out with the community. That kind of placemaking could occur too. I forget the term, that kind of public realm kind of thing.
No, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I'm just reading a book on
All of the
the use of the area under railway lines in Tokyo.
Yeah.
I mean, it's incredible, just the amount of activity that is suddenly introduced to an area that was desolate,
Yeah,
and it's all over
yeah,
the city, not just we go to this area, it's like this. No, it's actually, this is sort of the neighborhood and
yeah.
small kind of thing.
People
So,
want to do that, craft fairs, whatever. And if it's not city property, maybe the city could, maybe it's state property, because we have a lot of that, and it's sort of, there's opportunity in some big parking lot, on weekends when there's not cars parked.
seize state property to return to the community.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, there's stuff, there's a lot of interesting creativity that could occur under the guise of placemaking.
Or you're throwing out office buildings,
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
I also want to make clear the state has done a very nice job of introducing public elements to their recent projects.
Mhm. Okay. Other comments before we move on to 2? Go ahead.
All right. Okay, goal number 2, page 10. Expand the supply of permanent income restricted affordable housing. This is a completely new goal. It's not in our current 2016 version. This is to address state requirements, Growth Management Act, and legislature. So, I did get a definition, if anyone noticed, inclusionary zoning, and kind of had questions about that. That's something I wanted to make sure we defined. I have it in here somewhere, so bear with me. Inclusionary zoning. Maybe I didn't print it off. Yeah, you can throw one out if you, so there's two types of inclusionary zoning. It's to incentivize new housing, either has mandatory or opt-in voluntary affordable housing, with new development. Sorry, hopefully that was close to what you were thinking.
Yeah, so inclusionary zoning can be everything from incentives, you know, higher density and so forth, in exchange to actual requirements. A certain percentage of units needs to be this for larger projects.
And the inclusionary part is really tied to the affordability of it?
It's tied to,
And-
yes, it's
Yep.
it's income,
Racial.
affordability, it's economics, it's to ensure that economic classes mix, essentially.
Yeah, we don't want to create concentrations of affordable housing
Right,
or,
right. But we're not, say, specifying, you know, an age component or to tackle, racial disparities or things like that.
I think we're using income as a surrogate
Okay,
for that.
okay.
yeah, a lot of those, are addressed in, goal 1. But they're all related, they're all relevant. Yeah, we just don't want to create concentration and therefore create, segregation.
Yeah.
And redlining, because then that's not equitable.
Yeah. Great.
All right, goal 3 is on page 11, maintain and improve the existing housing stock. This is a new goal that was from an existing goal and policy, combining old goal 8 and policy 1.1. Some examples would be to create a formal maintenance rehabilitation program, beyond the current city code for enforcement to ensure housing is decent, safe, and sanitary. It would be like a rental, so part of our rental registration program, ensuring that when there are rental housing or apartments, making sure that periodically they'll get inspected to make sure they're habitable spaces and keeping up to code.
And that's something that's not in place currently, that's something that needs to be added? Because you said, is that something that's currently happening or being overseen actually by the city?
Does create, so yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
We have, I would
not
say,
there yet.
I would say we have the regulatory base to do property maintenance now. Both our nuisance codes within the TMC, and also we've adopted the property maintenance code, which is, think residential building code or thing, it's just its own code that basically gives the city the authority to say, if you're not maintaining your property
Yeah.
properly, a multitude of ways the city can require you to do so. The next step, obviously, is having some level of inspection and enforcement. So this is sort of leading into that as part of the, identified.
Great.
If you really want to do this, it's going to require these resources and how we do it.
Yeah, it was also something we had identified in our housing action plan. So just incorporating action items and goals from our housing action plan, putting it into our comprehensive. Because the housing action plan does guide our housing element, which then gets translated into our development code.
And the thought is, obviously, with existing housing, it's a lot cheaper to maintain and keep it up than it is to build brand-new housing from scratch.
Yeah.
I can tell this story because it doesn't impact Tumwater, but it happens in Lacey instead of Tumwater. But, the organization that I'm with delivers firewood, to folks that need firewood. And, one of the places we deliver to at least 3 times that I can remember is a house in Lacey that has an old burned out trailer on the side of the property with somebody living in it, and then a, wood stove sitting outside the house with a pipe coming inside. And, we keep expecting that, maybe the city's gonna do something about that in between, deliveries of firewood, but every year it's exactly the same thing, different people living in the trailer. But, stormwater isn't the only place that doesn't enforce
Yeah.
those things, and enforcing them is going to displace people.
Mhm.
So,
Right.
yeah, so you've got a huge conflict there between trying to avoid displacement and, enforcing, the maintenance of facilities.
And also, I think it comes down to, if it's a threat to public health, you know, that's sort of like the number one concern. If you've got an issue that's just a problem and it's going to, as is it going to be directly harmful to people? That's the first priority. If it's sort of ramshackle and you got weeds everywhere and everything else, unless you've got rats going everywhere, it's probably going to be left as is, you know. So there are different gradations about how we approach those things. So,
Yeah, and this goal actually kind of goes into the, you know, it is maintaining our existing housing stock to keep it affordable, livable, equitable. Overarching theme there.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a big one.
That's a good one.
Yeah. And then we have goal 4. Make it easier for households to access housing and stay housed. This is a new goal. We got this from our Housing Action Plan Strategy 2, verbatim, same language. So this can range from supportive housing to home ownership to rental assistance. So when you think of to access housing and stay housed, it's helping with mortgages, working with nonprofits, finding funding for that, or
Does that extend to the city somehow assisting with insurance programs for whoever the owner is? You know, if an owner maybe has a property but is reluctant to rent because the insurance would go up or something like that, is there something that would play in this?
that's not something that we've encountered yet. One thing that we have been looking at, and this is working with the local lenders and others, is mechanisms to support mortgages for disadvantaged people, or for projects that are a little more, you know, serving a different group of people. I don't think we've gone far beyond that in terms of our regional discussions yet, because I think have too much other things to deal with at the moment. But I think, you know, that would probably be something outside of our wheelhouse right now to try to.
Okay, probably so. Okay.
Not that it's not an issue, it's just sort of how we would approach that.
Aren't some of these areas going to be jointly done by the cities and the county?
Yes. What has happened, the direction that we've been hearing from the county is, and this is what we currently have in our joint plan, is what we have in the joint plan is really focused on land use within the urban growth area. All of the other elements are basically adopted from the city plan. So the housing element, in my mind, would be adopted directly. In fact, that was a conversation we've had on the regional level when we were doing the housing allocations. When we did the initial method, we had allocated specific numbers to both the cities and the UGAs, urban growth areas, and it was producing these bizarre requirements that suddenly these urban growth areas that are on the edge of the city have to accommodate a higher amount of multifamily housing than the core cities, which doesn't make any sense when you think about land use. Okay, let's put as many people as we can as far as away from city services and everything else, and then just because we have a numbers game. So one thing that we're planning for in terms of housing units is the housing allocations that you'll be seeing, the revised ones are combined. They include both the cities and the UGAs in one number. And it's up to the cities basically to decide how that's going to be done and where it's going to be done. So we're effectively going to be doing that as part of the, this planning process.
Eric, you probably caught it already on page 13, 3.1. I think it should be identify rather than identity.
I did not catch it, thank you. There was also, I'm making mental notes, we do have some policies around, organizations to help with prospective homeowners with financial assistance, and then we also have some that help with, maybe rent, but,
We talk a little bit in general about, down payment of the 4.11 assistance for homeownership and rental. So one of the suggestions is to split those out.
yeah. Rules and policies. Packages. I think to make sure that there's policies for homeowners and renters, not just renters or homeowners. Making sure that there's some policies that will help, both. And then, also, 4.3, develop policies to protect vulnerable populations from displacement and inflated housing costs when on fixed incomes. So I think this was partially from our discussions around housing land trusts and manufactured home parks. But I'm sure there's other types of housing, not just manufactured home parks, that are, going through increased rents, for vulnerable populations and people on fixed incomes.
As part of our, look at determining whether there's sufficient land, for development, through this, comp plan, are we looking at identifying additional, areas that are suitable for, mobile home parks?
That's an interesting question, because the state has sort of actually put money towards this, basically building new mobile home parks and providing support to do that. We haven't done that, and I don't think we're going to do a special effort for that within the city. Without subsidy, I don't think, the market doesn't seem to be building new manufactured home parks. And so I'm always like, it's an existing area, it's an existing thing we want to keep and make sure that the units are upgraded over time, because they deteriorate faster than stick-built. But creating brand-new parks, I'm not sure. But that brings up a good point, because we don't allow them anywhere except in their manufactured home park zoning, which just happens to be the manufactured home park areas. So I don't know how we'll deal with that.
Since the owner of the unit doesn't have to buy the land, that is a shortcut to low-income housing.
Well, another thing is, under state law and under our current regulations, we treat, or the new regulations will be treating manufactured homes the same way we treat stick-built, meaning that there's not a size limitation. You follow the same kind of things. And so effectively, if you have any lot in the city, or you do a subdivision, you could do a manufactured home park on that. Whether you treat it as rentals or not, that's we don't know. It's just how you manage it. So it's kind of an interesting between thing. I'm not sure, how it exists and how it could exist in the future is probably different than how it has been in the past, is how I'm also thinking.
I have a question about, do we have any data about how economic activity may drive rent or housing cost increases at all? I'm thinking in particular like Airbnb type stuff. I don't know what the general term for those are.
Short-term rentals?
Yeah, something like that.
I think in very specialized areas like resort towns and so forth, I think that's an issue.
What I'm getting at is, do we have data for Tumwater? And is that an issue need to be addressed here?
No, and it's something that I think the Housing Action Plan talks about
Yeah.
tracking, and if it becomes an issue, address kind of thing. I think even Olympia, we've had conversations with their community development director about that very issue, because, you know, the South Capitol community is an area that would be number one in my mind, because of a variety of reasons. They haven't seen that as an issue. And they've been, I want to say much more, I don't want to say more attuned, but they've been paying attention to a lot more things than we have. And when we have done sort of spot checks of Airbnbs, potentially within the city and so forth, it hasn't appeared to be taking away housing stock. Yeah.
But we do have that as,
Mechanism to
Yeah.
monitor it somehow?
Now, we do have the regulations in place to do that. It's also a matter of enforcement and tracking.
and then I did want to mention on 4.3.4, that should probably actually be policy 4.5. This is reviewing our development and permitting requirements under Title 14, ensuring clear and objective standards for design review and improve clarity on timelines around complete permit applications. I know we talked about permitting requirements. I just don't think it's relevant to 4.3, so it should be, I think 4.3.3 should be 4.4, and then the permitting standards and review time should be 4.5. And then that brings us down to goal 5, which is continually build on resources and collaboration to improve implementation of housing strategies. This is a new goal, and we got that from the Housing Action Plan. This is talking about ways to collaborate with other plans and goals and policies, other jurisdictions, city standards, working with the county, identify and develop partnerships with organizations, and then 5.9, establish a permanent source of funding for low-income housing, and then an action item for that, support legislative action to increase permanent sources of funding for low-income housing. Like Brad was saying, a lot of that permanent supportive housing or emergency housing is grant or state funded. So ensuring that we create revenues for affordable housing and tracking those, and I guess.
There's also a couple parts to that. There's the funding for the construction of low-income housing, and then also for the ongoing services for the residents. Because I think those two really go hand in hand. Another thing, sorry, I thought that was the primary.
Yeah.
I got distracted by.
Oh, I had a mosquito.
Does it change the, thought on 5.9 if you say establish a permanent source of funding to support low-income housing, opposed to 4?
Mm-hmm.
Which one of those two do we want to do?
I think actually what we should do is have two different policies. One is actually for the construction of, and the second is to support low-income housing. That gets at the wraparound services and all of those other things that I think are essential. The discussion we've had, well, so it's budget season for the city, so that's one of the things that we're talking about is the level of impact and effort, or what the city wants to do on its own for that kind of thing.
The city doesn't have to do these things directly. A lot of the things in Olympia are done through nonprofits, with the city funding a nonprofit rather than the developer.
Right, what,
And-
usually, and the funding either comes from the home fund dollars that are collected specifically for that task, or it's come through the city applying for housing-specific grants. Really not the city general fund that pays for this kind of.
But it doesn't result in a huge staff increase in the city. It's the nonprofit functions in much of that.
It does, actually, because it requires, somebody to monitor those
Those contracts affect.
grants and to look for opportunities of funding and other things to sort of connect all the dots to assist with a particular project. So, I'm aware of Olympia having about 4 or 5 people solely dedicated to affordable housing. That's separate from dealing with the homelessness issue. That
There are about 40 people working for Interfaith Works.
exactly. But what I'm saying is.
Those are 40 people that aren't working for the city.
We have less than a quarter of a FTE doing 5 people job in Olympia. So there, if we're going to truly do it and we're gonna manage the grants and to be much more active in that kind of, we're gonna have a higher level of staffing to do.
It seems that that's the case, which I don't doubt, that that's a good opportunity for partnership beyond, you know, one city with the, nonprofit, but
Right.
multiple cities or
And
regions.
that's exactly what the intent of the Regional Housing Council was.
Yeah.
Started to get that.
Yeah, and they would not just kind of be a, kind of an advisory body or whatever, but an actual, I'll call it, managing some money, a pot of money.
And the Housing Authority itself.
Yeah. Good. Are there, do they have some, are they going after the new grant funds that I saw, I think it was in the news today or yesterday, that the
Saw that.
federal administration?
Erica has the time, so I can ask her to take a look at it.
And get some,
I just got back from vacation, so I'm a little reluctant to open any emails.
other things on 5? Oh, that's it?
Yeah.
Probably
Right, the 5
Goal
is it.
1 is really lengthy and dense, but there's a lot of good stuff in there. There are some that probably are a little repetitive. I have my list, but if there's anything else related to housing that staff should be thinking of or including, you know, please provide comments.
Mhm.
And
This is
also,
rough draft.
as a reminder, we've included those things that are currently in the plan that we took out. At the
Yeah.
end of the document, so,
Yeah, with those ones, I went through our old one. I tried to remove, or my thought was remove goals, policies, or actions that weren't really, that we couldn't track, that we didn't have a lot of action items, that weren't really a part of the housing action plan or didn't seem, I wanted to focus on our housing action plan, the new legislation, middle housing, addressing affordable housing. But if there's any that you think should be incorporated, into the new updated version from the old version that was removed, those are, like Brad was saying later on, the last few pages of this document, so.
Good. A lot of work, a lot of work.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So this may be a first draft, but it's pretty thorough.
Yeah.
Thank you. I went through the checklist. I think, the checklists were included in the packet as well, so you
we
can,
included the housing, the special housing.
yeah. And like I was saying, right now I'm going through the Commerce Guidance books. There are 3 books, about 120 pages each, so. Really, crossing Ts and dotting Is, making sure that we're addressing housing.
Let me check in. Commissioner Varela, did you have a comment? thought you were
Nope.
raising your hand.
No, nothing for me.
Okey-doke, great. Anybody else here? John?
Just, your next meeting, we had planned on a, a transportation tour.
Oh, that's right, John.
We've had, on the transportation side, a couple staff members who've unfortunately had to been out of the office, so we haven't advanced as far as we wanted to getting our planning done. So we moved that to the first meeting in October.
Okay,
We don't have anything currently scheduled for your meeting on the 27th. If you would like us to schedule something.
you mean a field trip or a?
We don't have anything we're ready to discuss on that.
Oh, okay, so we may,
We may cancel.
cancel that meeting. Okay. Do we need to take action tonight to say go ahead? All right.
I know you don't want to take time off during the summer.
I move to cancel the meeting on August 27th due to no activity.
Commissioner Tobias, I'll second.
Great. Been moved and seconded to cancel our August 27th, 2024 meeting. Is there any more discussion about that? All right, everybody in favor of canceling August 27th, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? I think I heard it. All right, we're done. We're off. We're canceled. Okay. Anything else, Brad, you want to mention? Are we're still on for whatever the first meeting in September, though?
Yeah, so the first meeting in September, we'll actually be talking about the transportation plan update. It'll be up.
Okay. Very good. And will we have the transportation planning manager here? Okay, cool. Great. Okay. Other than that, looking for another motion.
Commissioner Tobias, I motion to adjourn.
Great.
Second.
Right, that was Commissioner Kirkpatrick seconding. Any discussion? Great. It's been moved and seconded to adjourn tonight. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? No. All right, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Have a good evening. Be safe.
Good discussion. Good work.